Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into something that is going to completely shatter the noisy, flashy, fake rich culture that we are bombarded with every single day. Look, most people spend their entire lives just trying to look rich, but the real masters of the game, they are busy becoming incredibly wealthy in total silence. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to show you the exact architecture of a ghost financial empire. We're going to cover everything from the very first dollar you save all the way up to the complex legal structures that protect millions from the prying eyes of the world. Oh, and I'll also reveal the invisible ruler that's currently moving every asset you own, probably without you even realizing it. So let's just get right into it. I want you to imagine the sheer panic of checking your bank account and seeing exactly $10. It's terrifying, right? At that level, money feels less like a tool for growth and way more like oxygen that's just required for basic survival. The reason most people stay stuck working decades longer than they actually need to isn't because financial independence is impossible. It's because those first few years of saving are essentially invisible. When you save your first few $100, the results look so tiny that you almost automatically assume the system is broken. It's a sense of total futility. And honestly, this is the fragile bridge where most people fail. They end up quitting right before their momentum actually gathers. Now, I want you to contrast that. Imagine checking that exact same account and seeing $61 million. But here is the massive catch. Absolutely nobody in your life has any idea that money exists. Not your neighbors, not your friends, maybe not even your extended family. This is what it means to have a ghost empire. It's a huge, silent machine working tirelessly in the background. But how do you get from $10 of panic to $61 million of complete and total silence? That brings us to Section 1. The foundation, the $10,000 shift. You see, the journey between those two extremes doesn't actually start with $1 million. It begins with a crucial psychological boundary at exactly $10,000. Now, that number isn't magic, but it is incredibly powerful because it fundamentally removes the panic that makes life so incredibly expensive. When you have zero savings, your brain operates entirely in defense mode. A $1,200 flat tire, that is a massive high-interest debt crisis. But when you have a $10,000 shield, that exact same flat tire is really just an annoyance. This cushion gives you breathing room. It allows your brain to shift from defense mode into offense mode. You literally move from asking, how do I survive this week, to asking, what can I build next? You stop being a reactor and you start being a planner. And that shift is the absolute prerequisite for building an empire. Moving on to Section 2, the engine. The secret clock of wealth. To scale that new foundation into a machine that works while you sleep, you really have to understand the rule of 72. This is essentially the secret clock of the wealthy. Early on, you are the engine of your own wealth. Every single dollar relies entirely on your labor and sacrifice. It's like pushing a really heavy snowball uphill. But once you set that foundation, the clock starts ticking. By dividing 72 by your annual return, you can predict exactly how long it takes for your money to double. It turns a vague dream into a measurable countdown. So if you start with $50,000 and hit a 10% return, your money doubles roughly every 7 years. The first cycle takes you to $100,000, the second to $200,000, and by the fifth cycle, you've cleared $1 million. The real danger here isn't the market dropping. No, the danger is missing just one of these cycles, because missing one can literally add an entire decade to your working life. But you can't just sit around waiting for this doubles to happen, right? You have to aggressively fuel the engine, and that requires a two-part strategy, offense and defense. Offense is all about expanding your income, gaining high-value skills, or starting a side business. Defense is the absolute ironclad discipline of keeping your lifestyle completely flat, even as your paycheck grows. Let's say you increase your earnings to $10,000 a month, but you force yourself to keep living on your old $4,000 budget. That gap right there, that is pure investment fuel. You have to treat every new dollar as a silent worker joining your team, a worker who never sleeps and never asks for a raise. If you let lifestyle creep absorb your raises, you are essentially firing your absolute best workers before they even get a chance to start building your house. Let's look at Section 3, the floors, the three-layer portfolio. Once you have that fuel, you need the actual investment architecture to scale it. You need to build floors into your financial house using a three-layer system. First, you have growth assets. Think broad index funds. These act as the engine to build your core wealth over time. Next, you have income producers like real estate investment trusts, covered call ETFs, or dividend aristocrats. These provide the cash flow you need to live on without ever touching your principal. And finally, you have stability assets like treasuries or high-yield savings account. This layer acts as your shock absorber. It ensures that when the market inevitably sinks, you are never, ever forced to sell your valuable assets at a loss just to cover your rent. And the results of setting this architecture up are stunning. For example, by strategically utilizing high-yield REITs or covered call ETFs in your income layer, you can generate nearly $3,000 a month in purely passive income. Again, that's without touching a single dime of your initial principal. It becomes a completely self-sustaining ecosystem. Now, a lot of people will say, well, shouldn't I just wait for a market dip to start building this? Absolutely not. Research proves that sitting in cash and waiting for a 10% dip carries a massive opportunity cost. Healthy markets consistently hit all-time highs. Buying consistently, yes, even at all-time highs, mathematically beats sitting in cash. Why? Because it ensures you never miss the market's absolute best days, which historically happen right around highly volatile periods. Understanding this is what allows you to invest with total confidence, no matter what the news is saying. Which brings us to Section 4, the weather, the invisible ruler. While you are diligently building this three-layer system, you have to keep your eyes on the macroeconomic weather. What is actually moving your money? Most people just assume that random news headlines or wars halfway across the world are the primary drivers of their portfolio's value. But what if I told you that 90% of the time, that's completely backwards? Almost everything in the global economy is priced in US dollars. The dollar is essentially the invisible ruler. When the Federal Reserve turns hawkish and raises interest rates, the dollar gets stronger. Think of it like that ruler suddenly getting longer. Because the measuring stick is longer, everything it measures, from Bitcoin to gold to stocks, suddenly looks smaller in price. If you only watch the news headlines, you're just seeing the symptoms. But if you watch the strength of the dollar, you're seeing the actual cause.
Finally, Section 5, the security system building a ghost empire.
So you've built the foundation, fueled the engine, structured the portfolio, and you're tracking the macroeconomic weather. But how do the true masters legally and physically protect all of this wealth once it reaches tens of millions of dollars? It starts with a holding company. This is a special type of entity that doesn't actually produce any goods or services itself. It exists entirely to own controlling stakes in other businesses and assets. It acts as an impenetrable legal firewall. For instance, if a slip-and-fall lawsuit happens at one small business you own, it is completely walled off, legally protecting every other asset in your empire. Let's break down the exact three-step architecture of true invisible wealth. Right at the very top, you have the trust, which requires absolutely no beneficial ownership disclosure. Beneath that sits the holding company, controlling all the assets anonymously. And then beneath that, you might have 10 completely separate LLCs, isolating the operational risk of 10 different everyday businesses. This structure is so incredibly robust that in one well-documented case, a forensic accountant during a near divorce couldn't even pierce this architecture to find a $61 million net worth. Running a ghost empire requires extreme compartmentalization. The accountant only sees the cash flows. The lawyer only sees the trust. The bookkeeper just thinks she works for 10 entirely unrelated small businesses. Even the owner's own mother might not know that she was the beneficiary of a secret corporate discount for her broken furnace, completely paid for and routed quietly through this invisible holding company. Nobody, and I mean absolutely nobody, sees the whole picture, except the architect. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with the very real emotional reality of maintaining all of this. There's a profound, quiet exhaustion that comes with being the single load-bearing wall of a massive, invisible financial architecture. The price of admission for a life where nobody's behavior towards you is contaminated by your money is a very specific, quiet kind of isolation. It really makes you look at the world differently, doesn't it? What if the person living right next door to you is quietly managing a $61 million empire right now, and you have absolutely no idea? The fake rich are loud, but the truly wealthy are entirely silent. So the only question left for us is, are you ready to start building your own silent $10,000 foundation today? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I will catch you in the next one.